Hey, welcome to edex World, another video in the AS A-level accounting series. In the previous video, you must have seen that how difficult it is to distribute the overhead cost of a business onto the products if multiple products are being manufactured. If you've not seen that video, I would ask you to first see that video and then watch this video. These videos are in continuation, so you have to watch all the costing videos from the beginning. So in this video, we're going to study how do we allocate and apportion the cost of overheads over to the products so that these costs can be absorbed by the products and can be charged on to the consumer by calculating a selling price such that all these costs are covered and a decent profit is made by the business. So in this video, first we are going to study the meaning of cost units and cost centers. Then we understand what is allocation of overheads and also apportionment of overheads. Then the reapportionment of overheads of service cost centers onto the production cost centers. And finally, there's something called elimination method which have to be used in certain cases of reapportionment of overheads, which we'll see later. Before going ahead, you can also consider joining my online course on AS level accounting and A level accounting. If you are interested in practicing accounting more with me and getting prepared for your exams in 2022. So what are cost units? Cost units are products or services that are sold by the business, and the intention here is that the overhead cost of the business have to be absorbed by these cost units. Then what are cost centers? Now, cost centers are departments or processes through which the cost units, which are the products of the business, pass, in order to get produced. And we can link the overhead cost of the business with these departments or processes. For example, if there is any cost related to machining, like machine depreciation, machine insurance, and there is a department called machine department, which is a service center, which is a cost center. So we can link the machining cost with the machining cost center. So cost centers are departments or processes through which the cost units have to go through in order to get produced, and we can link the overhead cost with these cost centers directly. We can say that, okay, these costs belong to the specific cost centers. At times, the relationship cannot be established directly, and in that case we will have to apportion on a suitable basis. Don't get confused by these terms, allocation, apportionment. I'll explain everything in the coming few slides. But cost centers can be divided into further two parts: production cost center and service cost center. Production cost centers are departments or processes that are engaged directly in the production of the product or delivery of services. So these are production departments, while service cost centers are departments or processes which work to provide services to other departments in the business, other production cost centers or other service cost centers. So to run a business successfully, you will have to have production departments that will be directly engaged in producing the product. But apart from that, you will have to have these ancillary departments also, so as to ensure smooth functioning of the production cost centers. So let's see some examples of cost units and cost centers. Let's say we talk about a car manufacturer. For these car manufacturers, the cost unit will be the different car models that they sell. So I told you cost units are products or services that the business sells. So the car models or different types of cars that the business sells will be the cost unit. Now, to ensure complete production of one car, that car unit will have to go through the assembly department, the painting department, and many other departments, obviously. So these departments will be the production cost center for a car manufacturer. Now, in the process of production, these departments will need a lot of, let's say, spare parts and raw materials. So these departments don't go and directly buy it from the outside market. They will place the orders with the spares and stores department. Now, these spares and stores department, their purpose is to provide smooth services to the production cost centers, and hence they become the service cost center of this business. Another business, let's say we talk about a steel manufacturer. the different grades and types of steel or metal that they sell will become their cost units. Before they sell it to the consumer, the raw material will have to pass through many departments so that it can be converted into finished product. These departments will be the production cost center, like the cutting department, the melting department, the processing department, chemicals department, and so on. To ensure smooth functioning of these production cost centers, business might have set up some ancillary departments like operations department, logistics department, pantry department, so that the functioning of the production cost centers and other service cost centers can happen smoothly. So I hope the meaning of cost units and cost centers is very clear, because the later part of overheads explanation will depend on these. So next term that you need to understand is the allocation of overheads. See, when an overhead is incurred, it has to be for a certain department. Okay. For example, if there are two departments, assembly department and machining department, and there is an overhead being incurred, let's say we talk about depreciation on machinery. Now, depreciation on machinery is very clear that it has come from the machining department, because the machines are in only machining department and not assembly department. So we can clearly allocate the overheads, the depreciation on machinery, to the machining department. When this direct relationship between an overhead and a department can be established, and we can transfer the overhead cost directly to that department, that process is known as allocation of overheads. So allocation of overheads is transfer of overheads or of a particular overhead to a particular cost center which is responsible for that overhead. There is no confusion that this particular overhead is generated by multiple departments. No, it is directly generated, or only one cost center will be responsible for this overhead, and this overhead hence can be allocated to that overhead. For example, the painting material purchased can be directly allocated to the painting department. Obviously, the assembly department will not buy painting material. So the overheads related to paint will be directly allocated to the painting department. Overheads related to food items can be directly allocated to the pantry department. No other department or cost center will be responsible for this overhead. I also gave you an example of this depreciation machinery. It can be directly allocated to the machining department. The next important term that you need to understand is apportionment of overheads. Now, there are so many other overheads being incurred in the business which cannot be directly allocated to a particular cost center. For example, if you're paying a factory rent, now there may be so many cost centers or departments working together inside the factory. So you cannot say that the particular factory rent that you've paid, it directly can be allocated to one single department. No. It has to be apportioned over or apportioned to multiple cost centers or multiple departments. So apportionment of overheads is the transfer of overheads to the relevant cost centers on a suitable basis. So where overheads cannot be allocated to one particular cost center, they have to be apportioned over multiple cost centers on a suitable basis. Example, rent of the premises I already gave you can be apportioned. Now, understanding on what basis can you apportion these overheads is also important. So if I talk about factory rent, and if I tell you that there are 3 departments in the factory, on what basis can you transfer the cost of the factory rent over these departments? Obviously, factory rent is paid based on the floor area of the factory. Higher the area, higher would be the rent cost. So logically, the department that is occupying the largest area of the factory will have to bear the largest proportion of factory rent. So the rent of the premises can be apportioned over multiple cost centers based on their floor area occupied by these cost centers or by these departments. Electricity expenses of the entire factory, again, you cannot say specifically that it is by one single department, because the business might generate a single electricity bill, not department wise. So this cost can be apportioned based on the energy consumption by these departments. If the meters are available and if the business is measuring exactly how much cost is how much electricity is being consumed by each department, then it becomes easy. Based on the energy consumption, you can apportion the electricity cost over these cost centers. But what if the business does not have an accurate measure of how much energy is being consumed by each department, then another suitable basis could again be floor area, because larger the floor area, in most cases, there will be higher energy consumption. Logically speaking, there may be cases where this may not be true, but if energy consumption is not given, you can apportion the electricity cost on the cost centers using the floor area. The next example is indirect salary cost, wages paid to people who are not directly engaged in the production process. If these people were directly engaged in the production process, you could have treated their salary or wage cost as direct cost and it would become a part of prime cost. But since this is indirect cost, these have to be either allocated over production cost centers or apportioned over cost centers. Let's say allocation is not possible for some reason. Maybe it's not very convenient for the business to exactly find out how much cost is, how much cost has to be allocated over each department. So one can apportion the total indirect salary cost over the cost centers based on the number of indirect workers each department is employing. So next you need to understand is the reapportionment of overheads. The overheads allocated and apportioned to the production cost centers can be easily absorbed onto the cost units, which we will maybe understand in the next video. What do you mean by absorption of overheads? But for now, understand that there were two types of cost centers. So till now what we've done is we have allocated and apportioned the business overheads on a suitable basis to the various production and service cost centers. Now the cost of production cost centers can be absorbed onto the cost units, but this cost of service cost centers cannot be absorbed onto the cost units. What is absorption? Again, I will tell you in the next video. So what is the next step is that whatever is the cost of the service cost center, they have to be reapportioned and transferred back to the production cost centers on a suitable basis again, so that ultimately all of the cost of the business are there with the production cost centers and they can be absorbed onto the cost units. So reapportionment of overheads is a process of transferring of overheads from the service cost centers to the relevant production cost centers based on how much of the services have been used by each of the cost centers. Now why this is done? This is done because the cost of the service cost centers cannot be directly charged or absorbed to the cost units and the cost may remain unabsorbed. Again, you might not understand these terms right now. I will do an example in this video and I'll also explain absorption in the next video. Then the concepts will be very clear. The next important concept is the reapportionment of overheads using the elimination method. We will come back to this in a bit. So let's look at an example. So this is an example of a manufacturer who has given us these overheads, costs that have been incurred during the period. There are 4 costs here. And also some other information is available regarding the production and service cost centers. So this business has 2 production cost centers, machining and assembly, which are responsible for the production activity, and 2 service cost centers, stores and canteen, the job of which is to just provide service to the other cost centers and ensure smooth functioning of the business. Our first step is to do allocation of overheads. Our next step is to do apportionment of overheads. And our third step is to do reapportionment of overheads. Allocation of overheads can be done when you can associate a certain overhead cost with one production cost center directly. So if I look at the first overhead, depreciation on machinery, in brackets they have given us machining. It means that this particular cost is only incurred by the machining department and hence I can directly allocate this cost of 8750 to the machining department. So allocation is done and it can be done only for one overhead, because for other overheads it's not clear that which department they belong to. So it means they are general overheads which have been incurred by all the departments. When an overhead is incurred by all the departments, they have to be apportioned on all the departments on a suitable basis. So machinery maintenance, 27,000 has been incurred. We need to look for a suitable basis so that we can apportion these costs over the cost centers. If I go through the information given below, floor area doesn't make sense for machinery maintenance. Kilowatt hours is the energy consumption. Doesn't make sense to distribute machinery maintenance cost over departments using this, because machinery maintenance may not have any direct connection with energy consumption. Stores request sent, again not a suitable basis. Number of staff members, doesn't look like that this can be a suitable basis. Direct labor hours again has no connection with machinery maintenance. Machine hours used, it means the number of hours for which machines have been used in these departments. There can be a certain link between machinery maintenance cost and the number of hours for which machinery is used. So the 27,000, we will be apportioning the cost of 27,000 over machining and assembly department using the machine hours. So 27,000 will be distributed between these two departments in the ratio 14,100 is to 2650. So I'll just show you for one overhead how do you do it in detail. So for machining department, the cost will be 14,100 divided by 16,750 into 27,000. And for assembly department, the cost will be 2650 divided by 16,750 multiplied by 27,000. So for machining we get 22,728 and for assembly we get 4,272. So the total cost of 27,000 apportioned between these two departments in this ratio. Power 15,730. The kilowatt hours, the energy consumption, can be a suitable basis of transferring the power cost to these four departments, production and the service cost centers, in the ratio of their energy consumption. 3750 is to 2500 is to 750 is to 250, in the same way that I did for machinery maintenance. Rent of the premise, if you see the floor area is given, floor area would be the best basis to distribute or apportion the power cost, the rent of the premises to the production and service cost centers. So let's go to the next slide and see what has been done. The depreciation on machinery has been given on machining, to machining department only. So you see the entire cost is allocated to the machining department. This is what is meant by allocation, when a certain cost can be directly associated with one department or one cost center. Machinery maintenance, I showed you how we distributed between the two production cost centers using the machine hours, and 22,728 and 4,272, we already did the calculation. Power, I told you to distribute between the four cost centers based on kilowatt hours. You can do the calculation and then verify that you get these amounts. Same way, rent of the premises to be distributed between the four cost centers using floor area. Okay, once we do that, if you see, the total cost apportioned and allocated to the machining department has come to 72,278, assembly department 31,472, stores 8,160 and canteen 2,720. So this completes our apportionment of overheads. The next step I told you was reapportionment of overheads. Again, I'll just tell you why is reapportionment needed. If you do not reapportion the cost of service cost centers, which is 8,160 and 2,720, these costs will be unabsorbed, will remain unabsorbed by the cost units, and the business will not be able to charge these costs onto the selling price to the final consumer, and it will remain unabsorbed. Basically, the business will have to bear the burden of these expenses and might reduce profits. So our next step is to transfer the cost of service cost centers to the production cost centers on a suitable basis again. So I have two cost centers, stores and canteen. Question arises, which service cost center should I transfer first? Should I transfer the cost of stores first, or should I transfer the cost of canteen first? Let's go to the information given. See, the stores request sent is only there for machining and assembly. It means the stores department is giving services only to the two production cost centers. Whereas Staff members are there for all three departments: machining, assembly and stores. It means the canteen services are being taken by machining, assembly and stores department, because whichever department will have staff members, they will be consuming the services of canteen. So if you transfer the stores department first between machining and assembly, and later when you transfer canteen, some of the cost may again come back to the stores department, this because of this three members that are there in the stores department. And again you will have to reapportion stores cost again to the machining and assembly. So the point is, whichever department is providing, whichever service department is providing services to another service cost center, that has to be done first. So canteen will be done first and stores will be done second. So canteen total cost is 2,720 and number of staff members 2033. So I'll just show you the calculation here. So 2720 to be distributed between the three departments in this ratio. So 2720 divided by 53 multiplied by 20. This would be for machining. For assembly, it will be 2720 divided by 53 into 30. And for stores, it will be 2720 divided by 53 into 3. And that's how you get 1026, 1540 and 154. Next, if you see the stores service cost center, 8,162 was there earlier only, and an additional 154 has been added from the canteen. So the total cost under stores now is 8160 plus 154, which is 8314. This 8314 will have to be distributed between machining and assembly. On what basis? If I go back to the information here, the stores request sent. Whichever department sends higher stores request, obviously they will have to bear higher stores cost. So 8314 will be distributed in the ratio 150 is to 75. And that's how this 8314 is transferred to the two departments in that ratio 150 is to 75. At the end, if you see, the stores and the canteen, the service cost centers become zero because we reapportion their cost onto the production cost center, and the final cost of production cost center has come to 78,847 and 35,783. This just means that approximately the total overheads of the business, which were 114,630, approximately they have been incurred by the two production cost centers in this ratio or in this manner. Why am I saying approximately? Because the way the overheads are apportioned is just an assumption that these bases that we've considered are suitable bases or are the best basis available. But in reality, the cost might be incurred in a different ratio. But we are not concerned with that because it's not practically possible to find out for some overheads how much each department is incurring the overheads. So the best basis available we'll consider, and we get an approximate cost, which is okay for us. So for the next video, make sure you remember that what have we done till now. At the end we are just left with the cost in the production cost centers. This will be helpful in the next video. One final concept that remains is the reapportionment of overheads using the elimination method. So if I go back to the information given here, the canteen department is providing services to machining, assembly and stores because of the number of members in each three department, while the stores is just giving services to machining and assembly. It means only one of the service cost centers is giving services to another service cost center, while one service cost center is giving services to only production cost centers. But there may be a situation where these service cost centers are giving services to each other. Here, service cost center D is providing services to E and service cost center E is providing services to D. So these are called reciprocal services where multiple service cost centers are providing services to each other. In this case, we have to use the elimination method of reapportionment of overheads. So if you see the text here, if only one service cost center is providing services to other cost center, then overheads of such service cost center should be reapportioned first. We already did that. But if two service cost centers are providing services to each other, then this concept is known as reciprocal services, and we have to apportion the overheads using the elimination method. So let's see what's elimination method. Here the service cost center D has been given a cost of 10,000 while E is given cost of 12,000. Question is, which one should be done first and which one should be done later? So the rule is, whichever service cost center has the higher cost among the 2 or 3 service cost centers that they've given in the question, that should be done first, and the service cost center with the lower cost should be done second or third, whatever. So first we transfer the cost of service cost center E, 12,000, to the departments A, B, C, D in this ratio given 20, 10, 30, 40. So once you do that, you will get these amounts: 4,800, 3,600, 2,400 and 1,200. Now service cost center D, 10,000 was anyways apportioned, and additional 1,200 it got from E. So total 11,200. This will be given to the cost center, production cost centers only. Even though service cost center D is providing services to service cost center E, but we will not apportion the overheads to service cost center E, because somewhere the service cost center cost have to be eliminated. At the end, service cost center's cost have to be 0. If any cost remains here, it means that will not be absorbed by the cost units. So the 11,200, instead of dividing between A, B and E, we are just dividing it between A, B and C. And hence, since we are eliminating the service cost center E here, this is known as the elimination method of reapportionment. So when you divide 11,200 in the ratio 20, 10, 30, so 2:1:3, you would get 3,733, 1,867 and 5,600. And at the end, if you see, the production cost centers, the total overheads are done. The important thing here is, ultimately the cost of service cost centers has to be 0. You cannot have any overheads left in the service cost center. So I hope the concept was clear. Maybe I've gone a little too fast, but you can watch this video over and over again and you will get it ultimately. But you need to watch the previous videos and the next coming videos regarding these concepts so that you understand the entire process. Once you watch the next video, which will be on absorption of overheads, you will understand the entire process. Thank you for being there.